Korea's movie theater landscape appears to be undergoing some change this summer season. Instead of the classic male-dominated summer blockbusters, audiences are opting for horror films with young female leads. While female-centered horror movies have been around for a long time, they have recently had a resurgence with fresh material. For more, we invite Jae Soh, professor and filmmaker at Seoul Institute of the Arts, into the studio. Welcome, Professor Soh.
Nice to be back.
All right, so before we jump into our main topic today, we've got some welcoming news in the Korean box office regarding some films that we have been anticipating for a long time. So let's start with that first.
Yeah, so right now, like abroad and also in Korea, there's the movie The King of Kings, which is an animation, 3D animation that surprisingly, because it's based on the Bible, it's doing really well. Globally, it's made about $68 million, so that's a huge bump, and it's directed by basically the president of Mofax Studio, a CG company. Right. So, you know, he really kind of struck gold with this, and he has a lot. I think Lee Byung-hun does the Korean language version of all the animation voices, but you have Ben Kingsley, you have a lot of really big actors in that, so that's done really well. In Korea, it's done about 450,000 people at the box office. And I want to also talk about this movie, 전지적 작가의 시점, which is in English, The Omniscient Reader. And this is based on a famous webtoon by Shing-Shong. And basically, it's a fantasy action movie, and right now it's #1 in the box office. It just started, so it's only about 500,000 people have seen it, but it's gaining a lot of traction in the media. And you know, it has Lee Min-ho and has Jisoo from Blackpink in it. So I think a lot of people are really excited to watch this kind of action movie in the summer. Yeah.
I'm also very excited about that one, as I haven't watched it yet because it just got released.
Right.
But The King of Kings, I really had to contemplate between whether I should watch the English version or the Korean version,
right,
because we have really great actors behind the voices. So I started with the English version. I'm probably going to go back to the Korean version once more. But Professor Soh, it's now going to get a little scary, and I think our Bella has to be warned. She might get some goosebumps today.
I know. Well, summer does mean it's time for horror movies. Especially this summer, female actresses are, in their 20s, especially 30s, are, notable for taking the main characters. So please tell us more about this, Professor.
Yeah, I think it's maybe a coincidence, but there are a lot of female leads in these horror films. So we have Noise with Lee Sun-bin. She was in a girl band called JQT, and Noise is doing really well in the theaters, directed by a first-time director, Kim Soo-jin. So that's a film. And then we have 2 films coming out. One is called Ghost Train. It has Ju Yeon-young, who is from The Extraordinary Lawyer Woo Young-woo, and she's in SNL. So now she's in a dramatic role for that. And also, there's a movie called The Ghost Game, about sort of seances and things like that. That has Kim Ye-rin from Red Velvet coming out. So these movies are sort of a trend where, traditionally horror movies do have a female lead, like, Nightmare on Elm Street, things like that. But in Korea, it's sort of unusual that all these movies are coming out together, where sort of the main character is a woman. And right now, audiences seem to really like it.
That's very interesting. I mean, there is an assumption that female lead movies could be a kind of box office risk. But with these releases this summer season, do you think that perception could be broken?
Well, I think it's a global trend. There's a lot of movies coming out where, a lot of female leads are happening. And just recently I saw, Scarlett Johansson with, basically Jurassic Park series. So it's proving that it depends on sort of like, I think the audiences are now very attuned to watching certain genres where women characters are sort of the lead. And I think it's finally catching up in Korea. But I think Korea's a Confucius society and very conservative views on women. But I think finally we're breaking free of those kinds of, I guess, traditional views about women. And I think audiences are sophisticated enough to go see a movie where the woman is the lead. Yeah.
That's welcoming news.
Yes, definitely. And these female-centered plots in horror movies are actually nothing really new, as you said as well, because we've had several hit horror films in Korea that was, female main character as well. But what can you infer about these recent movies getting attention more?
I think one of the things about right now, we had horror movies coming out, and that's traditionally does really well in the summer because, it's really hot. You go inside a cool theater and then suddenly these movies are jumping right at you, so it really scares you. I think it's also, horror is a genre that I think it's best seen in a theater with a lot of people where everybody screams at the same time. I remember seeing a movie in the US where basically it was almost like an interactive movie where the audiences were so into it, they were screaming at the actress who was about to open a door, they might be killed. They're like, watch out, things like that. So right now in movies, this is sort of, the horror trend is really happening. And I think after COVID, it's about time that we all go to the theater and collectively enjoy something. And I think horror is definitely a magnet for audiences to come to the theaters to watch that together.
And I have to say, for people who are not as good with horror movies as I am, I think it's less scary to go to the theater and watch all together instead of by myself in my home, right?
That
so I
true.
usually go to theaters to watch horror movies if I have to catch one that's really doing well.
Right.
You can grab the person next to you.
Yes. And yell and
Hopefully that's
freak out.
not going to be me. But I was going to say, maybe after hearing from Professor Soh, I was getting convinced to watch, to go watch these movies that we just introduced today, because I'm also not a big fan of horror movies in general. But again, having that interaction with other people, being scared altogether is definitely one of the things that could even let us go to the movie theaters to watch those horror movies, because we even had some difficulties watching the trailer before.
Yes, I did.
And they make some scary trailers these days.
Right.
For sure. Yeah.
Now, let's move on, Professor Soh. Another interesting aspect we are seeing right now is in recent horror productions, there are storylines that are based on reality-based stories. So that means some social life issues, from noisy neighbors to social media. So why do you think audiences are kind of drawn to these kind of real horror-based stories?
Well, these kind of reality-based horror is, first of all, it's scary to be based on something that could really happen to you. So it's a primal fear that really it's triggered by these movies, and also the anxieties that we feel are sort of realized onto the screen. And it's become almost a genre in itself. There's a lot of stuff with found footage, or there's a YouTuber sort of carrying a camera that's live streaming, and then something really scary happens. So, for example, basically Ghost Train is about a YouTuber who is covering some, subway station where people have disappeared, and then suddenly stuff happens to her. So, these are things where I think when you go see it in a theater, and then after you have to take the subway home, it kind of hits you like, oh, I just watched something that could really happen to me.
Right.
So that's a trend that's happening, and it seems like right now, film is a reflective of the zeitgeist of all the audience members, and right now it seems like people want more reality-based stories. I think it really scares them. And recently, I think reality has been scary. We had the martial law, and then, the pandemic. It seems like the world is kind of a scary place right now. So.
And that's interesting that you mentioned, for instance, the subway. We get scared after watching that and having to use the subway. That's very realistic, while ghosts, for instance, are not
supernatural.
I mean, some believe in them, but the general public probably is more afraid of things that could happen in reality. So that's an interesting point here.
Just by watching the trailer previously, something that's more fictional is less scary than something that's non-fiction. That's real life is a little bit more scary for me. At the same time, there seems to be an increasing diversity of styles in these horror movies lately. So what are some works that you're kind of keeping eye on for?
Well, recently, it's playing in the theaters right now. Noise is an excellent movie. It's directed by Kim Soo-jin, a first-time director. And he chose, basically, there's a movie called Wall to Wall on Netflix, which is happening at the same time. It's about living in a high-rise apartment, and you're hearing scary sounds. Noise is about basically two sisters that live together, and one of the sisters disappears. The other one has sort of problems with hearing, and then basically you hear these noises happening, and you're trying to figure out where the noise is coming from. So what I really like about the two movies, for example, is the use of sound. A lot of times in movies, it's a sound effect, or the movie music suddenly crashes in, and then I see people jump in the theater. So using sound is probably as a psychological sort of factor to scare you. A lot of times when you're scared alone in your house, it's the sounds that scare you. It's not so much the images, like, you know, you hear somebody's footsteps,
Right.
or you hear a creeping door open, and then it's your imagination starts to think what's behind there. So movies are a perfect example where those sorts of fears are realized onto the screen.
I'm also more afraid of the background sounds of horror movies than actually the visual effects. But Professor Soh, there seems to be a preference for films that bring real-life horror and social anxiety to the screen. So in your opinion, how different is that from past scary movies and scary movies today?
Right. I mean, we talked about how the trend towards women characters. In traditional horror in Korea, it was really based on supernatural, ghost stories, basically. But now it seems the trend's moving towards urban legend stories, things that you've heard about on the internet or that your friend has talked about, you know. And perfect example is like the Ring series. It's basically about a story where, you know, you're not supposed to watch a videotape of an image and you watch it and then you're cursed. So the trend towards that sort of like supernatural start is like now creeping towards more reality-based. I think, you know, supernatural is interesting, like we say Exuma, which was also, you know, it's kind of like an occult movie and all this stuff. But at the same time, I think the sort of reality-based movies where it could really happen to you and it's psychological, those are the most scary movies because like you start to dream about them. You have nightmares after you see the movies and it's not like they let you go. I think a supernatural event is something so fantastic that you're thinking, yeah, it could happen to me. But if you watch something like, as I said, in a subway, or you go back to your like lonely apartment or something like that and you start to hear sounds, that could really affect you later, you know. So those are the things that people get a thrill out of. And I think the great thing about movies is that it's not really happening to you. I mean, you could see the characters dying and stuff, like it's really scary, but it's a release, a cathartic release when you go see the movies and you feel like a lot safer afterwards, in my opinion.
Very briefly, Professor Soh, so is it the end of ghost movies, supernatural movies? Do you see the trend now more leaning towards reality-based stories?
I don't think so. Supernatural stories, you know, I think in Asian lore, just in Korean, if you go back to Korean shamanism, there's so many scary stories, you know. So, you know, Kumyo is like the perfect story of like, you know, Korean ghost stories, and there's Japanese and Chinese ghost stories. So that's not going to go away. And also, I think a lot of webtoon stories are based on that. So those are going to be made into movies. But I think right now it's a trend towards sort of reality-based because right now that seems to be interesting to a lot of audience members. So
Right.
that's
And also
the movement.
Quite recently, Exuma, for instance, was also a big hit. So let's hope to see this mixture of all of these kinds of horror movies. And thank you very much for your insights today. Have a safe and pleasant weekend.
Yeah, be safe.
Be safe.
And thank you, Bella, as always. We're going to see you back next week.
Yes, I'll see you back next week.